Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. And I hope that you all people are very well and you have fresh minds as well. As you know, in these days we are discussing areas of translation research. And so far we have talked about text analysis and translation with its various categories, translation quality assessments with its different dimensions, genre translation with a long list of genres, and multimedia translation. Today we are going to talk about these four areas: translation and technology, and translation history, translation ethics, terminology, and glossaries. So let's start, and I hope that you have already read the relevant pages and noted your questions or queries that you may ask me when I come to class today, inshallah. Translation and technology is a very vast area in translation studies research. But before that, we need to think about technology. A very simple definition of technology can help us, and it is this: whatever work can be done with the help of a machine is called technology. Means the human being need not to use his or her hands for doing that work. So whatever helps a human being in accomplishing different various physical, mental tasks is called technology. I am not into the technical definition of the technology. I'm just taking the practical aspects of technology, and I think this can work for our understanding. A role of technology in human life, I think the whole history is evident that technology has brought a long list of facilities, ease in human life, along with its, of course, side effects and problems at the same time. So we see technology in sciences. We see technology in daily life. We have fans, we have TVs, we have computers, we have washing machines, we have cooking machines, we have softwares that make human life very easy, or bring speed in action or in achieving certain things. So the translation is a human effort. So translation, our technology in translation discipline, translation profession is very methodological and essential at the same time. You see, if we use watch to know the time, if we use mobiles to contact with the people and have a lot of other activities on these devices, why not to use technology in doing this very serious job, which is translation. So need of or use of technology in translation profession and translation research is so obvious that no one can deny this fact. As for the technology that can be discussed, or categories, main categories in translation, we can enumerate software evaluation, software localization, effects of technology, website translation, the place of technology in translator training. So these are five major areas to be discussed as for the technology in translation as the research area is concerned. What is software evaluation? Software evaluation means evaluation of any machine translation or CAD tool such as terminology management program. Evaluation, assessment of these machine translation software or system or CAD tools, but these are two just examples: terminology management program or databases, or translation memory systems. These terminology management program and translation memory system, they enable translators to access previous translation and already translated documents. The benefit is very obvious as for these programs are concerned. How the research or evaluation can be done in this area, software evaluation. It can be done with an existing machine translation package, e.g. Systron, for example, or Reverso, or Google, or SDL Trados. Name any small or bigger translation package or translation system, and then translate a number of texts of a particular text type and draw conclusions about the strengths and weaknesses of that particular software, and then make recommendations for improvement. This can be a very interesting area of research which the translator, scholars working in the area of translation studies can carry out. Comparing two or more products which are designed to do the same thing. I think you have gone through this experience in this course. Twice I gave you exercises of this kind where you do the comparison. But here we are talking about the comparison between two machine translation packages. I think in the first exercises we also did this comparison with the human translation. But this partial combination is possible. And as usual, you will see in the end of topic or subtopic some references which are already included in this book. So if you want more information about this, you can see this cited reference. Number two is software localization. So what is software localization? It is the process of adapting a product for a target language and culture, such as software interface, online help files, or accompanying documentation. This software localization is usually done for the companies, for the agencies, translation agencies, because in different cultures, localization, this term refers to a local culture or local norms or business working styles or model. So if we are working here in Pakistan, maybe we need a different kind of interface that fulfill our requirements as a translation agency or translator. Online help file, which kind of online help files we need. If I make it very simple, try to understand this. Meeting the individual needs of the individual translators and individual agencies working in a specific geographic area, region, means Pakistan, because this is very much related to the business practices of that particular country, because laws are enforced and other things are also involved, so they have to work within all these given framework. So they need a different kind of technology where the software fits in their requirements. How can research be carried out in this area? A study of localization project from commissioning to delivery. Commissioning means from the order given by the client to do the work, and to delivery of the work, completion of the work, and how the what steps were taken technologically and translationally, both sides. Role of the participants in the process of localization. um, the process of localization, of course, many people they have roles such as the project manager or freelance translator or software engineer, whatever. Mechanism of quality control for this software localization. Evaluation of the finished product. My comment on this, that mostly if you see that the software localization is, although divided into the area of translation studies and software engineering, but the major part or the major role is played by those who are working in the area of software development and software engineering. Number third, as for the translation and technology is concerned, is effects of technology. What is an effect? Effect means impact of translation technology, soft and hard, on translation product, translation process, and translation function. We know all the three terms. We don't no need to talk about it, but keep these three terms in your mind: product, process, and function, and impact of translation technology on these different uh, dimensions of translation studies. How to do research in effects of translation technology? As we have mentioned three things, so we can also relate them. Attitudes of translators toward a certain type of software or equipment. Are they very familiar? Do they like it, or they dislike it, or do they face problems in using that, or they have some aversion toward a certain kind of software or equipment? Analyzing aspects of text translated through this way is also analyzing the impact of translations on readers and critics. So also the keeping in view the product, process, and function aspects, we can also enlarge the dimensions of research in this area. Number four is website translation. Modes of research in website translation. Studying the current practices in website translation. What are these current practices in website translation? It will be a little difficult for me even, and for you people, because the business of website translation in our country or in our practices is very remote. But anyways, we can talk about various modes of research in this area. Investigating the effects of website constraints and user domains demands on translators' decisions at both the micro and macro level. And exploring the feasibility of using controlled languages in website design to facilitate translation. These are the aspects that actually take place at the stages of planning and implementation when website and a project of website translation is done. Number five is place of technology in translator training. Again, it's a very less researched area in the field of translation studies in general and in our country, of course. So, what is meant by this technology in translator training? Technology in translation pedagogy is another term used for this purpose. And short-term and long-term programs. Just we have short courses. We have a full degree program of 4 year or 2 year degree program in translation training and translation education. We can also see this the online translation training program for preparing translators and interpreters, or blended training program, where we blend both the online, the face-to-face physical sitting programs, and also the programs that are used at distance level techniques, where the techniques of distant levels, distance education are used. Research areas studying what extent this has happened in your country. For example, to what extent we are using technology in translation education. And I would like to mention here that one of our students, MS students, is doing research in this area, and she is doing research in the area of how much technology is used in our translation programs in the departments of Arabic, in the department of English and Urdu in our university, and Numal both. So comparison between these two universities and languages. And she is, of course, nowadays collecting data for this purpose. We can talk about this project when I come to the class. Investigating how this could be done better, of course, based on the descriptive research of the first kind that I just mentioned. Suggestions or improvements can be given. What sort of technological skills would be most appropriate in which context? for translating certain written translation courses and interpreting and text types and so on. Who should design and teach such courses where the technology is used in the pedagogy or in teaching? It's a big question. I think it's a very interesting question for our practical benefits. And number six is the translation history. With this, we can move to the next topic. Number six, translation history. Uh, translation history, translations can have long-term effects on whole languages and cultures and scientific developments. These can be assessed in a historical or in a cultural study. So we are here concerned with the history. And mind you, when we use the word history in this context, and we are using the word history in the context of translation, we are referring to at least more than one language. Means translation means at least two languages. So more than one language means that we are talking about two cultures. So when it comes to the cultural aspects, the scope of this area of research actually enlarged. Here, the categories can be discussed under these questions: who, what, why, how, and I have added another question which is when. And let's see these categories. Who. In who question, the focus is on translators themselves in the context of the history. So their background, their educational background, their social background, their cultural background, also their relations with rulers, also their relations with the publishers and editors, their motivation and translation practices. This point number one, you can see encompasses one, two, three, four, five, six dimensions for research, or six different topics of research, not topics, dimensions of research, and each dimension can bring a lot of topics, placing their translations in the context of their lives and work, also through their biographies, and of course how they produce this work and their lives. Discovering forgotten translators, those translators who have not been studied and who are actually not known or not well known in the area. Discovering them is another aspect of research in this dimension. Discovering the context of the intercultural space they inhabited between two languages and cultures. The translators are essentially, they are multicultural people. They are not one culture, because if you know, knowing two languages means that you are associating yourself at least with another culture in addition to your original culture. So if you are doing translation between Arabic and English, actually you have combined in you as a translator two cultures. One is the English, the other is Arabic. Or you have Urdu, for example, Pakistani. They carry this Pakistani culture in them, and then if they add another language, which is in this case English or Arabic or other language, that means they are representing these cultures, because they are representing through their translation, through their interpreting, and also they carry these two culture in their personality. You can read more through these references mentioned here. The next question is what. The focus here is on the product, that is the translated text. Which texts are translated or not translated in particular cultures and particular times. So we see in the modern time the Urdu language, for example, did not translate the scientific text from English. The Arabic as well did not in the beginning of the 19th century and also the 20th century, and still now the tendency is to translate most of the time the philosophical, political, social, and literary texts. So question comes here: what type of text have been translated at this particular time? Relations between majority and minority languages, of course, is a very, very interesting area of research. For example, The English language nowadays has become a global language, or represent the globalization, and it's widely, of course, understood, and is a hegemonic language. But if we compare English language with Urdu, or we find that the English language becomes the majority, and the minority language is this. Chinese language is a majority language, minority language. So relationship, studying the relationship between these languages. Also relations between majority and minority communities, because the languages are spoken in certain communities. So languages represent a lot of things. I have given two examples here. One, of course, taken from the book, is social and political disorders in Eastern Europe in early 90s, and effect that affect the volume and nature of translations into Polish, Slavic, and Czech. What kind of texts were translated in Abbasid period, Toledo School of Translation, modern Muslim world, and so on? Focus on products, relations between imperial centers and colonial borders, relations between victors and vanquished, those who were defeated. Research into reviews of translated works can give insights into their reception and the reasons for their success or lack of it. I mean, we can find this data in the reviews that have been written by the critics around different translated works. Number three is why. Focuses on reason. So why particular texts are translated at particular times. Reason may include use of translation to establish a national literature, particular set of relations between the two cultures, individual interests of a particular publisher, and so on and so forth. Reasons, I think, cannot become confined here. Reasons can be enlarged. There can be more reasons because of the colonization. Why? Because of the imperialism. To answer the question, why? Because of the commercial reasons, the questions, the answer in response to why, and also because of the ideological reasons, why this was translated, and why that kind of books were not translated at certain times. I think there is a mention of Oscar Wilde, because the work on the popularity of Oscar Wilde plays on German stage during Nazi period. So I have just added this slide. An introduction of Oscar Wilde was an Irish playwright, novelist, essayist, and poet. And after writing in different forms throughout 1880s, he became one of the London's most popular playwrights in the early 1980s. His name is Oscar Wilde, and one of our friends used to say, Oscar Wilde is very wild. Is not, is a simple person. How? Focus on procedures and strategies adopted by the translators and other stakeholders. Varied translators' strategies through the ages, depending on the demands of the commissioners, publishers, readers, personal preferences. Attempt to link the micro, that is textual, and macro, that is social, historical, intercultural aspects of translation history. I mean, the scope here is in this question is how, where we are talking about the procedures and strategies adopted by the translation. Certain procedures are adopted by translating the text, and they are not related to the source text or the system of the source text or the linguistic system or the target text. They are broader than that, the macro level, which is the social, historical, and intercultural aspects. As I said, I added this question in number 5, when actually the focus translation is certain time. You see, philosophically, if we ponder on the social phenomenon, we have always two. We can have many questions, but the core two questions remain. One is the space, and the other is time. So I just want here to emphasize on the time, because time factor is so important as for the history is concerned, and in our daily life is also. But as for the history is concerned, we have seen that At there was a time when a nation behaved in a way, but then time changes, the nation uh, change his behavior. So if based on this principle, we see the effect of this on translations as well. And this when actually is related to all the previous four questions at the same time. But in my view, if we just focus on when, that is the time, for example, when was the development of Urdu language effectively or with full swing took place in the subcontinent, and then we go for the study of the time factor, and we find that that was the time when the internal systems had become very weak, and the colonizers, they were of course attacking the area, the territory, and they were changing our political, social, cultural, educational systems, and they were affecting on other sides, and that actually led to the development of Urdu language with the help of translation, translating from English into Urdu. Now, this time factor can be also linked with how it happened. So, in my view, the time factor can also be studied and researched separately. Number seven is translation ethics. So, what is meant by translation ethics is how to deal with the client, one aspect of ethics. How to meet the deadlines. You make, as a translator, you make promises. So, how to meet the deadlines, how to fulfill the promises that you have as a translator made to your clients. The question of translation quality, the quality of translation is a big question in the area of translation studies. Meeting translation brief. Your client has given you some guidelines for doing a translation. So, meeting those requirements, can you meet? Did you meet? Or why didn't you meet if you did not meet? So, this is the very simple definition or meaning of translation ethics, along with other, of course, aspects. Why study ethics in translation? Why do research in as for the translation ethics are concerned? Why do we study, make it a research point, ethics? Because translation is an industry, and like other industries, it involves money, it involves human capital, it involves circulation of human efforts, it involves the product, it involves the effect of product, it involves communication, it involves technology, it involves, so that's why, because this is a collective, complicated human activity, and hence it becomes an industry, and when it becomes an industry, it should have some ethics. So the question of ethics is always very prevalent in all other areas. You see, we have this question in politics ethics. We also talk about the medical ethics. We also talk about the legal ethics. We also talk about other, in professional areas where ethic is essential. So we need to have ethics in translation, and hence we need to have research on ethics in translation studies. Classical work in translation ethic is prescriptive. The old classical work says that don't do this, do this. But as for the translation is concerned, because it's a very tricky business, it is very complicated human activity, mental activity. So there, I think the prescriptive ethics do not stand for a long time. So modern work is that they problematize the concept of good in translation. What is good translation? And what are good practices in translation? So new dimensions to our understanding of different kinds of translation ethics. In this, we have different dimensions, and the authors, they have mentioned four different kinds of ethics: cultural and ideological factors that affect the ethics, codes of practices or code of ethics, and personal versus professional ethics. Let's see quickly see the these different kinds of ethics in the faithful representation of the original text. Is a big question, because what is faithful representation of the original text? That means you translate word for word, or you just follow the source text and try to translate. You are trying to prove your faithfulness to the original text at the cost of the target text or target readers or the requirements by the client. There are many other things that should be discussed in this question. Translating is a service to the client. If it is a service to the client, then what is the meaning of loyalty in translation? Remember one thing: if I'm loyal to the source text, I have a different definition of loyalty. But if I'm loyal to the client, the one who is paying me as a translator, I should have different definition of loyalty and faithfulness. Cooperation between the two as the primary value. The We will discuss this in class. Cultural and ideological factors is the questions raised by the cultural term. There is in translation studies a big, huge, combination of theories under this term, cultural term, which means that the external factors influence translation process different ways. So, influence of culture and ideology on translations. We are talking about the ethics. So, the cultural and ideological factors. I would like to mention here one example. For example, if you translate a text and that text is written if you as you translate this text into Urdu, and that text has been written in a culture which is not acceptable here in Pakistani culture in some of its aspects. How do you deal with those taboos, with those texts which may create problem for you, for your publisher? So what to talk about the ethics in this context? What do we mean by ethics here? Are you loyal with your nation? So you are manipulating the translation, or you loyal with the source text, and then you are translating at the cost of your fame, or at the cost of the publisher's fame, or at the cost of you are damaging, in the context of this, you are damaging the local norms, and you are bringing taboos to your people, and hence you are creating problem for you and for your publisher, for your reader, etc. Influence of translations on target readers or target cultures. Role of translation as a powerful instrument in ideological program. And this history has actually, it's been very evident in this regard, how the ideology of a powerful nation was imposed on the weak people, on the poor people, on colonized people through translation. Code of ethics or code of practice is another aspect of study in this area, which is establishment of official code of ethics by national professional association. This is a common trend nowadays. Ethical principles that professional translators are expected to abide by, and I give you one example or two examples here. Internationally agreed upon documents concerning translators' behavior, such as Translators Charter 1963, and then Nairobi Declaration 1971, Lima Declaration 2015, and you can see the details of this code of ethics. I had the intention to bring some examples of code of ethics here, but I leaving it to you people. I'm giving you this URL, and you can go there and see the code of ethics prescribed by International Federation of Translators. They are essentially different. International Federation of Translators Code of Ethics, but if you see a code of ethics used in a country, in an Asian country, in a European country, they would have different. They would have similarities, but at the same time they would have differences as well, and these differences tell the local cultures taste, local cultures preferences. The research aspects may include analysis of national, international document or code of ethics or practices, comparison between code of practices, obligations and rights in various countries. You can compare between two documents as a whole, or you can select some of the aspects from various documents and conduct the comparison. Legal aspects related to these codes sworn in as part of accreditation process or intellectual property rights. These are essential parts of code of ethics. In the countries where they have very strong footing of these code of ethics, they are effectively implemented. Personal and professional ethics. This division is always there, and this also gives us an opportunity of research. So, line between professional and personal ethics. What to do when loyalties to author and reader clash? So, I think here, of course, the code of ethics also suggests the solutions for this, but you as a translator have your personal preferences, personal ethics. Sometimes you do not agree with that code of ethic, and you have your own decision, you have your own code of ethic or principle, and then you take the stance, that stance, and hence you have your own solution. Translators right or duty to improve originals? It's a big question in this. If the original text has grammatical mistakes, linguistic mistakes, spelling mistakes that actually create problems for the translators. So, is it the translator duty to improve the originals, or there's a very interesting debate on this. And here comes the code of ethics. What principles are adopted by the translator? The boundaries of a translator's responsibility. What are the boundaries? To what extent translator is responsible, and after that he or she is not responsible for apparently seen mistakes in the translated text, or deviations in the translated text, or disloyalties observed in the translated text, when it might be more ethical not to translate at all. Sometimes it is very important that the translator can say that no, I'm not going to translate this text. Be seeing the translation brief or translation guidelines or translation commission or translation rates or translation conditions or translation deadlines, whatever. The Here, of course, the professional ethics can also guide, but as a personal, translation as a person and having personal principles and ethics can also take his or her own decision. Research may include that it is conceptual, or we are linking various other research areas to it: conceptual or historical or descriptive or prescriptive. Descriptive means that you just, as a researcher, you just describe what is happening and analyze the situation. Single document is analyzed, or comparison between two documents or more than two documents is conducted. Prescriptive means that after studying certain documents and principles, ethical principle, you also, in your conclusion, you prescribe and you suggest different, you prepare a document to become a code of ethics for certain people. These references can give you more, of course, insights as for this subject area is concerned. Now, terminology and glossaries. What do we mean by terminology and glossaries? Terminology means a word or phrase or definition specified for a concept in an academic discipline. Take the examples from translation studies. The word studies in translation. The word translation itself is a terminology discussed by the scholars, and they are still discussing the meaning of translation. The word translation, what does it mean? What does it stand for? And also the different theories, equivalence or shift theories. What do we mean by shift, and what is meant by product, what is meant by process and effect, and so on and so forth. So a word or a phrase with this definition specified for a concept in an academic discipline. Glossaries means a list of terms, so essential part of terminology in a particular domain of knowledge with their definition. So list which provides the different terminologies in a particular domain, and of course with their definitions. So terminology and glossary is another area of research in translation studies. How we can divide it into two major parts: theoretical aspects where the concepts of terminology and its details are discussed, and the practical part is the bibliographical field work and the corpus processing, where the software engineering or the software development comes in. Research areas or research questions can be: what is the concept of terminology in a particular domain of knowledge? And then how to understand relations between different concepts. How do non-linguistic science relate to linguistic science? All we know, we have non-linguistic science, and they are used as terminologies in some of the areas. Take the example of mathematics. Take the example of phonetics in linguistics. Take the example of other physical sciences or pure sciences, where they along with the words science have also been used to indicate to certain concepts or certain terms. Research questions can: how to define a term. Of course, you go into the epistemological foundation of the term, how to formulate a valid definition for a specific term. How do terms evolve? History of the You go into the history and the factors that played their role in this evolution. How do terms cross language boundaries? They were developed in a certain culture in one language, and then they were translated from that culture and that language into other. And what can prototype theory tell us about the classification of terms and concepts? The prototype is a model of graded categorization related to basically related to the categorization, how categorization and the cognitive science is done, where some members of a category are more central than others. For example, when asked to give an example of the concept of furniture, chair is more frequently cited than, say, stool. So the categorization based on the most important, more important, important, less important, and so on. The practical aspects is selection of a domain, a language or two, and doing term identification and extraction work. Quickly, I can mention example. If you want to select or extract terminologies used in the published work of BBC and terminologies related to the political area of political science, you would go to all the published documents, published electronically or published in physical form, and then you select the terms that have been used in this area, or maybe in medicine, or maybe in sports, or maybe in other text type. So that is one of the practical aspects of doing research in this area. Preparation of terminology corpora. Now here it comes, of course the manual work is also involved, but in the end it is the software presentation of your work. Is computer program for automatic extraction of terms. This is linked with the translation technology, of course, the soft technology of the translation. So I think you can have more information through these given references. The point here is, which actually flashed in mind in the previous text, is that you can see, if you really understand the basic concept of these areas, that no area is independent. Every area is actually linked to each other. So always think in terms of creating links between these areas and other areas, of course, sub areas, subcategories mentioned in these 12 areas, because this is one way of bringing a good topic, a new one, which has not been studied elsewhere, even in advanced countries, and then In this, you can create your own niche for research, and of course, bring a new thing in for the readers, for the scholars. So, what is next reading assignment, students? Page 21 to page 27, and we are going to finish this topic in our next class, inshallah. And we are going to discuss these four topics: interpreting, the translation process, translator training, the translation profession. Thank you very much for being patient with me, and see you inshallah after some time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.